During my job interview, the HR person mentioned, "We're excited to have someone with your military background." I froze in the conference room chair, my resume still spread across the mahogany table between us. "I'm sorry, what military background?" Rebecca's smile faltered as she flipped through my application packet with increasing urgency. "Your service record, Austin. Afghanistan deployment, 2019 to 2022. It's right here on your background check." She turned her laptop screen toward me, showing a detailed military file with my photo, my social security number, and deployment records I'd never seen before. My hands started trembling as I stared at combat photos of someone who looked exactly like me, carrying wounded soldiers through desert terrain. Behind Rebecca, two other HR managers had quietly entered the room and were whispering among themselves while glancing at me with expressions I couldn't read. "There's been a mistake. I was in college from 2019 to 2022, studying mechanical engineering at State University." Rebecca's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like fear as she scrolled through what appeared to be 3 years of active duty documentation. The room temperature seemed to drop as she clicked through page after page of evidence that contradicted everything I knew about my own life. The military file contained details that made my stomach churn with their impossible accuracy. Basic training graduation photos from Fort Benning dated July 2019, showing me in dress uniform receiving awards I'd never earned. Deployment orders to Kandahar province with my signature on documents I'd never signed. Medical records from a traumatic brain injury sustained during a convoy attack in March 2021, complete with x-rays of a skull that supposedly belonged to me, but showed fractures I'd never suffered. Rebecca clicked through page after page, while the other HR managers moved closer, studying my face like they were trying to solve a puzzle. "Mr. Holloway, these records are verified through multiple Department of Defense databases. There's documentation of your Silver Star recommendation, your medical discharge paperwork, and your veterans' disability compensation claims totaling $58,428 annually." She picked up her phone, but hesitated before dialing. "I need to ask you something, and please understand this isn't an accusation. Do you have any memory loss? Any head injuries? Any reason you might not remember serving?" Her voice had taken on the careful tone people use when they think someone might be mentally unstable. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and Googled my own name. The search results that appeared made the room spin around me. News articles about Austin Holloway receiving the Bronze Star for saving 4 Marines during a Taliban ambush. Photos of someone with my exact face accepting medals at ceremonies I'd never attended. Video footage of military interviews where this other Austin Holloway spoke with a slight accent I didn't have, describing combat experiences in vivid detail while standing next to parents I didn't recognize. Rebecca's supervisor, a stern-looking woman named Catherine Walsh, entered the room carrying a thick folder and sat down across from me with the deliberate movements of someone conducting an interrogation. "Mr. Holloway, I've been reviewing your file, and we have some concerns. Your job application states you graduated from State University in 2022 with a degree in mechanical engineering, but according to the Department of Defense, you were medically discharged from the Army in August 2022 due to combat-related injuries." She opened the folder and spread out documents that seemed to multiply before my eyes. College transcripts that showed perfect attendance alongside military hospital records that placed me in Germany receiving treatment for the same dates. Student loan records proving I owed $87,000 for my education next to VA benefit statements showing I'd been collecting disability payments for PTSD. "These timelines are impossible, Mr. Holloway. Either you're lying about your military service, or you're lying about your college education, or there's something much more complicated happening here." Catherine's tone suggested she believed the third option was least likely. Rebecca had gone pale and was typing frantically on her computer, probably documenting everything for their legal department. The other HR managers were no longer whispering, but watching me with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for dangerous animals. I drove straight home from the interview, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My apartment felt foreign as I tore through every document I owned like a man possessed by some desperate need to prove my own existence. But what I found made the situation infinitely worse. My college diploma was hanging on the wall where it had always been, but when I pulled it down to examine it closely, something seemed off about the seal. The paper felt different than I remembered. I grabbed my phone and called State University's registrar office, demanding they verify my enrollment immediately. "I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway, but our records show you withdrew in September 2019 due to military deployment. We have documentation of your academic suspension for active duty service." The registrar's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was discussing the weather. "That's impossible. I graduated in 2022. I have my diploma right here." There was a long pause before she responded. "Sir, according to our database, you never completed your degree. Your last registered class was Introduction to Engineering Ethics on September 15th, 2019. After that, we show a military leave of absence that was never resolved." I hung up and immediately called back, thinking there had been some mistake, but 3 different registrar office employees confirmed the same information. My college memories were somehow completely fabricated, or someone had altered official records to erase my entire education. My phone started buzzing with notifications as I frantically searched through my belongings. My mother was calling, but when I answered, her voice sounded strange and distant. "Austin, honey, your father and I are so proud of you for finally getting help for your PTSD. The counselor at the VA said you've been making real progress in dealing with your combat trauma." My mother's words felt like physical blows. "Mom, what are you talking about? I've never been to the VA. I've never had PTSD. I was in college, remember? You came to my graduation ceremony." There was a long silence before my mother responded, and when she did, her voice was filled with the kind of gentle concern people use when talking to someone they think is having a psychological breakdown. "Sweetheart, you didn't graduate from college. You enlisted in the army right after your sophomore year because you said you wanted to serve your country. Your father and I were terrified the whole time you were deployed. We still have all the letters you sent from Afghanistan." She started crying softly. "The doctor said the brain injury might affect your memory, but we hoped it wouldn't be this severe. You've been getting treatment for months now." I hung up and immediately called my father, but he confirmed everything my mother had said. According to my own parents, I was a combat veteran who'd never finished college, not an engineering graduate who'd never served in the military. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with a growing sense of dread that something fundamental about reality had shifted while I wasn't paying attention. My mother answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and immediately pulled me into a hug that felt like she was trying to hold me together. "Oh, Austin, we're so worried about you. The memory problems are getting worse, aren't they?" She led me into the living room, where my father was sitting surrounded by photo albums and what appeared to be military memorabilia I'd never seen before. "Son, we thought looking at these pictures might help jog your memory. The doctors said familiar images could help with the trauma-related amnesia." My father opened a photo album that supposedly documented my military service. There I was in every picture, but the images felt wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Me in basic training looking younger and somehow different. Me in Afghanistan posing with soldiers I didn't recognize. Me in a hospital bed with bandages around my head, unconscious but undeniably myself. My parents had apparently been living with a completely different version of my life story for the past 4 years. They showed me letters I'd supposedly written from overseas, describing combat missions and expressing love for my family in handwriting that looked like mine but felt foreign. They had medals displayed in a case on the mantel, including a Purple Heart with my name engraved on it. Every piece of evidence supported their version of events, yet I had no memory of any of it happening. My younger sister Melissa arrived while I was staring at the photo albums, and her reaction was even more disturbing than my parents. "Austin, thank God you're here. I've been so scared since the VA counselor called yesterday. She said you've been having episodes where you don't remember your service." Melissa sat down next to me and pulled out her phone. "Look, I still have all the text messages you sent me from Afghanistan. You were so scared during that one attack where you got hurt." She showed me a conversation thread that spanned months, filled with messages that supposedly came from me describing combat situations in detail that felt completely foreign. The messages included photos of Afghan landscapes and military equipment, apparently sent by me from overseas locations I'd never visited. What made it worse was that my sister's responses in the conversation showed genuine fear and love for a brother who was risking his life in a war zone. She had screenshots of news articles about battles my unit had supposedly fought, with my name mentioned among the casualties who'd been wounded but survived. "Melissa, I swear to you, I have never been in the military. I don't remember sending these messages or taking these photos." My sister's face crumpled as she reached for my hand. "Austin, you're scaring me. You've been getting treatment for this exact problem. The doctors said the brain injury might cause confusion, but you seem so much worse today." She started crying as she scrolled through more messages, showing me conversations about my college classes that apparently ended abruptly in September 2019 when I supposedly enlisted. I excused myself and drove straight to the VA medical center, determined to get answers from someone who could explain what was happening to my memory and my life. The reception desk had my information on file, complete with appointment history dating back 18 months. According to their records, I'd been receiving regular treatment for PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and service-connected disabilities since my discharge. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, apparently my assigned psychiatrist, agreed to see me immediately when the staff explained I was having a severe episode. She greeted me like an old friend, with the familiarity of someone who'd been treating me for months. "Austin, I'm glad you came in today. Your mother called this morning very concerned about your memory problems getting worse." Dr. Rodriguez opened a thick file that contained detailed notes about our previous sessions, medication adjustments, and treatment plans for conditions I didn't remember having. "Let's talk about what you're experiencing right now. Are you having flashbacks to the convoy attack again? Sometimes trauma memories can make recent events feel unreal or make you question things that definitely happened." She showed me her handwritten notes from previous sessions, describing conversations we'd supposedly had about my combat experiences, my guilt over surviving when others didn't, and my struggles to readjust to civilian life after medical discharge. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up brain scans on her computer that supposedly belonged to me, showing clear evidence of traumatic injury consistent with blast exposure. "Austin, we've talked about this before. The IED explosion in March 2021 caused significant damage to your hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Memory consolidation problems are a direct result of your injuries, not something you can control through willpower." She showed me medical records documenting my treatment at military hospitals in Germany and Walter Reed, including surgical procedures to relieve brain swelling and months of rehabilitation therapy. The scans showed my name, my date of birth, and my social security number, but looking at images of brain damage that was supposedly mine felt like staring at evidence of someone else's suffering. "Doctor, I understand this sounds impossible, but I have no memory of being in the military. I remember being in college during those dates. I remember taking exams and living in a dorm room while these medical records show me unconscious in a hospital." Dr. Rodriguez nodded sympathetically while taking notes. "Austin, this is exactly what we've been working on. Your brain has created false memories as a coping mechanism to deal with trauma too severe to process normally. The college memories feel real to you because your mind built them to replace experiences that were too painful to remember." She prescribed additional medication and scheduled me for twice-weekly therapy sessions to address what she described as a serious deterioration in my condition. I left the VA medical center feeling more confused than when I'd arrived and drove directly to State University, determined to physically verify my education. The campus looked exactly as I remembered it, and I could navigate to my old dorm room and classrooms without hesitation. But when I went to the alumni office and asked to verify my degree. They confirmed what the registrar had told me over the phone. Mr. Holloway, you withdrew in September 2019 for military service. We have your withdrawal paperwork signed by you and your academic advisor. The administrator showed me documents with my signature authorizing the withdrawal and requesting that my transcript be forwarded to military education offices. But I lived in Miller Hall for 4 years. I remember my roommate Kevin and my engineering professors and graduating with honors. The administrator looked at me with growing concern. Sir, Miller Hall records show you lived there for 2 years, 2017 to 2019. After that, your housing contract was terminated due to military deployment. She pulled up additional records showing that someone else had lived in the room I remembered as mine for the final 2 years of college. My supposed roommate Kevin had graduated with a different person entirely, someone whose photos showed them sharing the space I thought I'd occupied while I was apparently overseas. That evening, I called my college roommate Kevin, one of the few phone numbers I still had from my student days. Kevin answered on the second ring, and his voice was warm with genuine friendship. Austin, dude, how are you doing? I heard from your parents that you've been having some rough patches with the PTSD stuff. Kevin's response confirmed what everyone else had been telling me. Man, I still remember how scared I was when you told me you were enlisting. You said you couldn't afford to keep taking out loans and you wanted to serve your country, but I knew you were also running from something. He talked about our final semester together in 2019, describing conversations about my decision to leave school that I couldn't remember having. You were so torn up about leaving engineering behind, but you said you'd finish your degree after your service using military benefits. I kept expecting you to change your mind right up until the day you left for basic training. Kevin described helping me pack my belongings and driving me to the recruitment office, experiences that existed in his memory but not in mine. Kevin, I need to ask you something, and please think carefully. Do you remember me graduating from college? Do you remember coming to my graduation ceremony? There was a long pause before Kevin responded. Austin, you never graduated. You enlisted halfway through junior year. I was there when you signed the papers, remember? You were so nervous about basic training, but you said your family needed the money from your military salary. The next morning, I drove to the military recruitment office where Kevin claimed I'd enlisted, hoping to find some record that might explain the contradiction between my memories and everyone else's version of events. Staff Sergeant Williams was expecting me, apparently having been contacted by the VA about my condition. Soldier, good to see you. I heard you've been struggling with some memory issues related to your service. He pulled up my complete military record on his computer, showing everything from my initial enlistment interview to my medical discharge paperwork. You were one of our success stories, Austin. Came in as a scared college kid, left as a decorated combat veteran. Your squad leader submitted multiple commendations describing your courage under fire. He showed me photos from my basic training graduation, my deployment ceremony, and my medical evacuation from Afghanistan. Every photo showed me participating in events I couldn't remember, surrounded by people I didn't recognize but who apparently knew me well. Sergeant, I know this sounds crazy, but I don't remember any of this happening. In my memory, I was in college during these dates, not in the military. Sergeant Williams nodded, understanding. Son, that's exactly what the VA doctors told me you might be experiencing. Brain injuries can scramble memories pretty severely. But look here. He pulled up video footage from my enlistment ceremony, showing me taking the oath of service with my parents proudly watching from the audience. The person in the video was undeniably me, speaking words I didn't remember saying, making commitments I didn't remember making. I spent the rest of that day driving around town, visiting places that held significance in both versions of my life story. The engineering building at the university where I remembered spending countless hours studying, the military surplus store where I'd apparently bought gear before deployment, the hospital where I'd supposedly been treated after my medical evacuation. Each location felt familiar yet foreign, like I was visiting sets from a movie about someone else's life. At the coffee shop where I'd supposedly spent my last night before leaving for basic training, the owner recognized me immediately. Austin, good to see you up and around. Your parents told me you've been having a tough time since you got back from overseas. She described serving me coffee the night before I left for the army, listening to me talk about my fears and hopes for military service. According to her, I'd been a regular customer who'd disappeared suddenly in 2019, only to return briefly in 2022 before disappearing again due to medical issues. Her memories of me included details that were either completely accurate or impossible fabrications, describing conversations about my family, my studies, and my decision to enlist that lined up perfectly with everyone else's version of events. The consistency was becoming more frightening than comforting, suggesting either an elaborate conspiracy or something fundamentally wrong with my own mind. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence from both versions of my life, trying to make sense of the impossible contradiction. On one side, I had my college memories, my diploma, my student loan debt, and my clear recollection of 4 years of engineering education. On the other side, I had military records, medical documentation, family photos, and the consistent testimony of everyone who claimed to know me. The two timelines couldn't coexist, yet both seemed equally real and equally impossible. I called my old college girlfriend, Sarah, hoping she might provide some clarity about my college years. Sarah answered immediately, and her voice carried the same concerned tone everyone else had been using. Austin, oh my God, I'm so glad you called. I've been worried sick since your mom told me about your memory problems getting worse. Sarah's response devastated my last hope for validation. Honey, we broke up in August 2019 when you decided to enlist. You said you couldn't ask me to wait for you while you were deployed, that it wouldn't be fair to either of us. She described our final conversation, a tearful goodbye that I couldn't remember having. You were so scared about going to war, but also excited about serving your country and getting the money to finish school afterward. I tried to talk you out of it, but you'd already made up your mind. According to Sarah, we'd stayed in touch through letters and emails during my deployment, and she'd visited me in the hospital after my injury. She had photos of us together during my brief home leave, showing a version of me that looked thinner and more serious than I remembered being. The investigation investigation I'd been demanding finally began 3 days later when federal agents arrived at my apartment with a warrant to search for evidence of identity theft or fraud. Agent Morrison from the Criminal Investigation Division spent 4 hours photographing documents, taking fingerprint samples, and interviewing me about discrepancies in my background records. Mr. Holloway, we've identified some irregularities in your documentation that suggest either sophisticated identity theft or deliberate falsification of records. The agents discovered that someone had been using my personal information to maintain dual identities, but the evidence was pointing in a direction I hadn't expected. Sir, we found financial records showing payments from your military salary to accounts that were funding your college education during periods when you were supposedly deployed overseas. Agent Morrison showed me bank records indicating that someone had been managing both my military and civilian identities simultaneously, paying tuition and living expenses to maintain the illusion that I was attending college while actually serving in Afghanistan. The financial trail suggested a conspiracy designed to allow me to serve in the military while officially remaining enrolled in school, possibly to avoid academic consequences or family disappointment. The question we need to answer is whether you were a willing participant in this deception or whether someone else orchestrated it without your knowledge. The federal investigation expanded to include my family members, who were interviewed separately about their knowledge of my activities between 2019 and 2022. My parents' testimony raised additional questions about their own involvement in whatever conspiracy might have existed. According to Agent Morrison, my father had been receiving military family support payments during my deployment while simultaneously paying my college tuition and living expenses. Mr. Holloway, your family's financial records show they were essentially living two different realities, supporting both your military service and your college education simultaneously. The investigation revealed that my mother had been corresponding with me through two different communication channels, receiving letters from Afghanistan while also visiting me at college campus events. My sister's social media posts during those years showed her simultaneously worrying about her brother in combat and celebrating her brother's academic achievements. The evidence suggested that my entire family had been maintaining parallel narratives about my life, possibly to protect me from consequences they didn't want me to face. Either your family is the most sophisticated conspiracy organization we've ever encountered, or there's something about your situation that defies conventional explanation. Agent Morrison called me back to the federal building 2 weeks later with test results that changed everything I thought I understood about identity and memory. Mr. Holloway, the DNA analysis of evidence from your military service compared to your current biological samples has revealed something extraordinary. The laboratory had found genetic material from my military service that was identical to mine, but showed signs of cellular damage consistent with exposure to chemical agents not typically found in Afghan combat zones. Sir, your biological samples from military medical records contain markers indicating exposure to experimental memory modification treatments that were part of a classified program. The investigation had uncovered that I'd been part of a secret military experiment designed to allow soldiers to maintain civilian identities while serving in combat roles. The program involved temporary memory suppression during deployment, followed by memory restoration after service, allowing participants to live double lives without psychological consequences. Mr. Holloway, you volunteered for a program that allowed you to serve your country while maintaining your civilian identity, but something went wrong with the memory restoration process. The technology had been designed to let me remember my college experience during deployment and remember my military experience afterward, but the process had malfunctioned, leaving me with only civilian memories while military records documented heroic service I couldn't recall. The revelation that I'd been part of a secret military program explained the impossible contradictions, but raised even more disturbing questions about consent and identity. Agent Morrison showed me classified documents detailing the memory modification procedures I'd undergone, including signed consent forms that I couldn't remember completing. Mr. Holloway, according to these records, you volunteered for experimental treatment that would allow you to serve in combat while protecting your civilian psychological identity from trauma. The program had been designed for soldiers who wanted to serve their country but feared the mental health consequences of combat exposure. Participants would have their civilian memories temporarily suppressed during deployment, allowing them to function as effective soldiers without the psychological burden of knowing they were risking their lives. After completing their service, the military memories would be suppressed and civilian memories restored, theoretically allowing them to return to normal life without PTSD or trauma-related disorders. The technology was experimental and apparently malfunctioned in your case, leaving you with civilian memories but no recollection of consenting to the procedure or serving in the military. The program had been discontinued after multiple participants experienced memory integration failures, but the damage to my identity had already been done. The federal investigation concluded with revelations that fundamentally altered my understanding of my own existence and the nature of identity itself. I learned that I had indeed volunteered for military service and completed heroic combat duty in Afghanistan, earning the medals and commendations that were part of my official record. I had also simultaneously maintained enrollment in college through a program that allowed experimental memory modification to protect soldiers from psychological trauma. The treatment had been designed to compartmentalize my identity, allowing me to function as both a civilian student and a combat veteran without the memories interfering with each other. However, the restoration process had failed, leaving me with only civilian memories, while my military identity remained locked away in parts of my mind that medical science couldn't safely access. Mr. Holloway, you are both people simultaneously, Agent Morrison explained. You earned your college degree and you earned your military honors, but the experimental treatment makes it impossible for you to remember both identities at the same time. The government offered me compensation for participating in the failed experiment, but no amount of money could restore the memories of service that had apparently shaped me into someone I couldn't remember being. The resolution of my case provided answers, but no real peace of mind about who I actually was or which memories belonged to the real me. I received official documentation confirming both my college graduation and my military service, along with medical treatment to help integrate the conflicting identities that experimental technology had artificially separated. Dr. Rodriguez continued working with me to develop coping strategies for living with fractured memories, helping me accept that I was both a combat veteran and a civilian engineer, even though I could only remember being one of those people. My family relationships slowly improved as we all learned to navigate conversations about experiences that existed in their memories but not in mine. Rebecca from the engineering firm ultimately offered me the position, saying my unique situation demonstrated resilience and adaptability that would serve their company well. The real Austin Holloway turned out to be someone much more complex than either version of myself I'd been able to remember, a person who'd volunteered to risk everything for his country while also pursuing education and civilian dreams. Living with fractured identity meant accepting that heroism and normalcy could coexist in the same person, even when experimental technology made it impossible to remember being both.